My name is Dean Kensock. I'm with the development team in Redlands, California. I'm here with Seth Sarakaitis, who's also part of our development team. We're both part of the content development team in Redlands. So we're here today to talk about the Living Atlas and how you can participate. This is the agenda we have in mind for this afternoon. I'm going to give a quick overview of the Living Atlas to start. How many of you have been to one of the other sessions that we've done the last 2 days on the Living Atlas? Oh, good, not too many of you. Good, so I won't repeat much of what you've heard then. So we'll do a quick overview of the Living Atlas, what it is, kind of the role of the community in the Living Atlas. Then we'll get into the how to participate. There's really two main ways to participate. I'm going to talk about one of them in some detail. Seth's going to talk about the other one in greater detail. And then we'll have time for questions and answers, I'm sure. But if you have any questions along the way regarding what we're discussing, don't hesitate to raise a hand and we can address it right there and then. So, if you were at the plenary, you probably heard a little bit about the Living Atlas, but I'll give you a bit more detail on that. So I like to start typically with this slide, which I'm sure most of you have seen multiple times about the platform, but just kind of point out the part of the platform that we're really focused on in this session. So that's really having to do with the online content and services. So if you're an ArcGIS user, you're using one of our apps like Desktop, Pro, ArcMap, or ArcGIS Online, or some of our native device apps like Collector or Explorer or Navigator, you can access content from online or via a portal. And that content is coming from a set of online services that we make available. And so our team is primarily the ones responsible for publishing that content from Esri. But we're also beginning to supplement that with other online content from other organizations that's available through the Living Atlas. So when we talk about the content that we provide through ArcGIS Online, we like to think of it and talk about it now as kind of a living atlas of the world, where there's maps and layers and tools that are published by various organizations, including Esri, that we make available. And these maps and layers have been organized thematically into different categories, like I've listed here, things like demographics or imagery or transportation or Earth observations. We have a set of people at Esri who are actively curating this content that's in the Living Atlas. So the Living Atlas content is literally a curated subset of the public content that you can find through ArcGIS Online. Jack was reading some numbers, I think on Monday. There's well over 1 million public items in online. There's millions of items. A couple million of them, I think, now are publicly available to all users. We're curating a pretty small subset of that, a few thousand of those items that we think are broadly useful to many users. Web maps, map layers, web mapping applications that we think many of you would find value in using and also are of a high level of quality. And that's what we feature through this Living Atlas. And you can discover and use that in various ways we'll talk about. So this content in the Living Atlas is coming from multiple organizations. A lot of it's coming from Esri. We're building and maintaining a large set of content. We'll talk a little bit about that. And a lot of the content now is coming from users. I mentioned on Monday, NOAA is a great example. They're an organization that's an authoritative provider of weather information, among other types of information. And they've recently stood up a geo platform through which they deliver a lot of that content. And we're making that available through the Living Atlas for users to easily discover and access. But there's thousands of other users who themselves are content creators, city governments, state governments, non-government organizations, commercial organizations who are publishing content. And then there's also content coming from partners, Esri business partners, imagery providers, weather providers, transportation network providers, and so forth that are publishing content. And then at the convergence of these three, we have something called community maps that we've had around for several years now, where both users and partners are able to share their data with Esri for us to integrate with other data and then publish information products. So that's a lot of what Seth is going to talk about, how that works and the benefits of doing that. So how do you access the Living Atlas content? There's multiple ways. It's not meant that there'd be one way that you can do that. You can access it through ArcGIS Online, through our gallery. There's a featured set of maps from the community in the Living Atlas that you can access. If you're in the ArcGIS Online map viewer and you want to author a map and add layers to your map, you can bring in layers from the Living Atlas. There's other web apps like the livingatlas.arcgis.com website allows you to learn about the Living Atlas and also browse a gallery of maps and layers and apps that are available. And now increasingly through other apps like ArcGIS Pro, you can access the Living Atlas in the newest versions of Pro to bring in layers or tools or rule packages into your Pro environment to use them. So Esri likes to think about our role as really providing a foundation of content that you can leverage. So most users are leveraging our Basemaps. That's one of the foundation types of content that we make available. And that's what we consider standard content. So in this diagram, there's a few things going on. At the top are some products like data and maps and Basemaps that we provide. And then they're shown along a spectrum from standard to premium. Standard meaning that they're freely available to all users. And premium meaning they're available, but typically there's a subscription fee involved with getting access to that. So things like Basemaps, we're providing as a dial tone service that you can use to build web maps and applications. And those are freely available to all users. At the other end of the spectrum, there's products like our Data Appliance, which is a version of our Basemaps on a physical hardware device that you can subscribe to deploy on premises for disconnected use or for just security reasons having it on premises. And all of these products are built from a common set of data that we compile, and we compile it from a few sources, from community contributed content, organizations like state governments and cities that provide their data, commercial content, organizations like here, that license data to Esri that we can include in our content, and then also open sources like OpenStreetMap that we build into the product if we don't have either community or commercial content. Places like Africa or Asia where there isn't commercial content available, we'll leverage open data. And then from that information we can build all these different products. One of the products we're building is our community map. This is our topographic map, but it also kind of transitions into other products like our street map and our canvas map. These are different views of the community map data that we're assembling. And we like to think that what we're building is one of the 5 or 6 kind of great maps of the world that's out there. Google's got one, Apple's got one, OpenStreetMap's got one, but there really aren't that many organizations who are building a global base map like we're building. But Esri's not building it on our own. We're building it with the cooperation, collaboration of all of our users who are contributing rich, authoritative data. Like in San Diego, SanGIS is one of our contributors, and they're providing a lot of the data, things like buildings and parcels that go into this map are coming from that local community. So collectively, we're building one of the great maps of the world. So if we look at the Esri content, we organize it as a portfolio of content around the different Living Atlas themes. So things like base maps and imagery and demographics. We have teams of people at Esri who are compiling that content. In some cases, they're actually building the content from raw materials. We have a team of demographers and statisticians that actually compile demographics for the United States, for example. But in many cases, they're taking the best available content and building maps from it. So our base map team isn't out driving roads and compiling street data. They're licensing that from commercial sources and community sources and then compiling that into a database from which we can build base map content with our cartographers and our production folks. And in the center of this diagram is meant to convey the kind of organization or the community of people who are compiling this information. So we're building information products in various themes from a set of community content. So what are some of the benefits of people participating in community maps, like Seth is going to talk about later? This has been around for 6 years, I think you said the other day? 2010 since we've been doing this. And when it started, it was really kind of a community-driven idea. We were publishing street maps using commercial sources, and we started hearing from users saying things like, hey, I've got better buildings for this city than the commercial provider, or my streets are more current than the commercial providers. If I gave you my data, would you put that into the map? Because we're using the map, but it doesn't reflect the best available data that we can provide. And so we started doing that kind of on an ad hoc basis. Did it about 10 or 20 times, worked out some of the procedures for that, and then decided to turn that into a community maps program. So it's kind of like an authoritative crowdsource. It's not like OpenStreetMap where you sign up and you maybe go digitize the street that you live on or add a few houses that you know about from imagery or just from local knowledge. It's more of an authoritative thing where the city of Riverside, for example, will give us all of their buildings, and they'll give us all their streets. So maybe one user is giving us 20,000, 50,000 features, and then we integrate that into our database. And Seth will show you how. I won't go into the detail. So the benefits of this really, if you're interested in doing that, are to reach a broad audience with your data. A lot of organizations like the city of Riverside, for example, they have the data, but they don't have the infrastructure to publish that on a public-facing service. One of our customers, City of Charlotte, North Carolina, and the surrounding Mecklenburg County, they had great data. They didn't have an infrastructure to deliver it. They were hosting events like the Democratic National Convention and NASCAR for a week. They were going to have millions of eyeballs on their infrastructure, and they had a choice of going to their IT guys and saying, all right, can you stand up 20 servers for a week, or publishing the data through us. They chose to give the data to us, and we were basically able to absorb their load, which is not a big additional burden on our infrastructure. So that's a big deal. Some of the users like the fact that we have high-end cartography. They can just take advantage of that. They don't have to author the maps and argue internally about how the maps look. Recognition, a lot of our users really, the only thing they really want is the attribution that people know the data came from them. So we do that with dynamic attribution. And then retaining ownership. Some other people who've accepted contributions have basically claimed some ownership. That's not what we do. We basically just ask for a right to use the data for the purpose we use it, and we don't ask for any ownership of the data. So those are all benefits. If you're thinking about this, these might be things to keep in mind or talk about with your colleagues. The usage of our maps has been growing for several years. In the early days, it was quadrupling and then tripling, and then the last few years, it's basically been doubling from year to year pretty steadily. And one of the things we've seen that's interesting is when we look at where the usage is happening, on the right you see a couple heat maps from a couple years back. A lot of the intense areas of activity, like in the lower map is Europe. You see activity in the Netherlands and in the UK and parts of Germany. The upper maps in Asia, you see activity in Japan and Thailand. That closely correlated with where we were getting nicely contributed content, high quality data from the Dutch cadastre or from the government of Thailand. So it was kind of a if you build it, they will come story we were seeing, where the highest quality data tended to attract the most usage. I'm sure there's a lot of variables there, but the quality definitely does seem to drive consumption. So that's kind of an overview. Let's talk now about how you could participate in the Living Atlas if you were interested. So in the Living Atlas community, there's really two types of participants. There are contributors. These are individuals or organizations who are publishing content into the Living Atlas. And then there's curators. These are individuals, currently mostly at Esri, who are reviewing, approving, organizing the content that contributors are making available to us. In terms of contributors, there's really two ways to contribute, and that's kind of what Seth and I are going to talk about the remainder here. One way is to publish content directly into the Living Atlas, and then the other is to publish it indirectly through products that Esri is publishing via our Community Maps program, and that's what Seth will go into. So let's talk about that kind of direct approach. So directly would be things like you've created a web map or a story map or a web mapping application that you'd like others to have access to. You've done that through ArcGIS Online and you'd like to share it. We'll talk about the steps for that in a second. But what are we looking for in terms of the criteria for accepting something like that? Well, for maps and layers, it's typically things like this. It should be well-designed cartography. If it's a map service, it should perform well and be reliable. If it's got attribute data, it should have well-configured pop-ups. So you can see a couple examples here. There's one's a weather map, the other's a demographic map. They both have nicely configured pop-ups and legends. It's not just a table with cryptic field names and the cryptic values that are to 6 decimal places that looks like somebody wrote it 10 years ago. It's a nicely configured pop-up that may be in textual form with attributes inserted appropriately, or charts and graphs that kind of illustrate the information. These are things that are easily done now in ArcGIS Online. It takes typically 5 minutes or less to create something that's pretty useful. So just these kind of finishing touches, things that makes them really attractive and useful for people. And then the thing that's kind of the Achilles heel for a lot of items, when I've been looking at items, I'll oftentimes find a beautiful map or app, and I look at the content, it's great, and then I go look at the description of the content, and it's not so great. It's got no description, or it's got a 5-word description, and then I see, I wonder who the publisher of this is, and then I look and it's Bob or Bob Smith, and I don't know who Bob Smith is. He doesn't tell me anything. Is he the chief cartographer for the U.S. Geological Survey? Is he a map hobbyist? I don't know, so I don't necessarily trust that information, even if it looks great on its surface. So for 5 minutes worth of extra effort, you can sometimes fix a lot of those things. So we've got some tools now that make that a lot easier. So the process basically of publishing content directly through the Living Atlas is essentially this. First thing is to create an item in ArcGIS Online. That could be a web map, it could be a story map, it could be a web mapping application, it could be just registering a service. You might have ArcGIS Server, you've created a map service, it could just be creating a reference to that in ArcGIS Online. And then step 2 is really to follow the best practices for sharing. How are you going to advertise that information so others understand what it is, what it isn't, how it can be used, how it can't be used, who you are as a publisher. We have some best practices for sharing in our help doc. That's what that link goes to. But if you search best practices in our online doc, you'll find that. And then number 3, the final step is really to nominate that content for consideration in the Living Atlas. And we have a new Living Atlas contributor app that I'll show you, how that works. So with that, I will jump out. Any questions before I kind of show mechanically how this works? Okay. So I, in my spare time last week, created a little map. This is a map of the U.S. congressional districts, and it's from our 2016 demographic data that we just released about a week ago. And we took one of the layers from that demographic data for congressional districts, and we published it as a hosted feature layer in ArcGIS Online. And one of the attributes that we added in it was for generations, things like baby boomers or Generation X, people of certain age ranges. So I created, using some of the smart mapping tools, this simple map. Took me a few minutes to do because I was using smart mapping. So it shows the predominant generations for every congressional district in the United States. So if I click, say, in the San Diego area, it tells me the population of this district and the growth of that district. And then it shows by generation the number of people. So I can see for, say, the predominant one here is millennials. There's 210,000 millennials, people aged 17 to 37. And you can see that they're kind of closely followed by the younger generation Z and the older generation baby boomers. So if you were, say, an aspiring congressman, you were looking to gain some votes, you were looking for what type of audience you might be appealing to, this might be useful information. So created a simple map. This is the map. This is the description for the map. And this is, if you go look at ArcGIS Online, this is a pretty typical one. And this one's got a little custom thumbnail that's been created. That's nice. It's got a short summary. It doesn't have much of a description. In fact, it doesn't have a description. But this is kind of par for the course, I would say. So let's see how this ranks. So I'm going to go to our Living Atlas contributor app at livingatlas.arcgis.com/contribute. And I'm going to click the Nominate button. It's going to recognize that I'm signed into this site, so it's going to ask me to access my content, which I'm going to let it do. So now it's signed in. I'm signed in with my ArcGIS Online account, and it's found some items that I own, including this generations map. So when I click this, behind the scenes, the app's going to run a quick calculation and give me a score on a scale of 1 to 100. And you can see here I got a score of 56. So basically it's like 56% complete. It's not really a qualitative thing, it's kind of a completeness thing. But in looking at a variety of factors that we'll look at, it gave me a score of 56. Now in order for me to participate, it says the required score is 80. So this is basically a way for us to kind of pre-qualify some things. Before we even have a curator, a human being actually look at this, we kind of make sure it's got to a certain level of quality where the basics are taken care of. So if I scroll down, I can find out why I've got a 56. So for each of these sections, there's a section on the details, the use and credits. The ones in orange basically have some issues. The My Profile, that one's in blue. So here I've got a picture of myself, I've got my name, I've got a little bio of who I am, I've got my email address. I got 21 out of a possible 21 points, and if I was interested in kind of what those scores were evaluating, I can hover over this info thing, and it kind of tells me, what you get points for, what you get points deducted for, and so forth. So that's really the only thing I've done well here. If I go to the details, I can see I got a good score on my thumbnails because I had thumbnails for it. Got a good score on the title and summary, but I've got nothing for the description. So there's a problem there. So I can fix that here. So I had pre-created a description. So I'm going to copy paste that in the interest of time, put that in. Now I noticed if I hovered, one of the things I get points for are hyperlinks, like to more information. So I've got a URL here, so I'm going to actually take advantage of that fact. And I'll just include a little hyperlink. Copy and paste that in, set that, save that. So it's going to save this information back to my item description in ArcGIS Online. Through the app, it can do that for me. And then once it's done, it's going to update the score. I think this takes a couple seconds. Yep. And then it's done that. So now I've got 8 more points. So now I'm up to 64 points. So I'm going to quickly go through and fix a couple other things. One of the key things is getting the right tags. In order to put things in the right category in the Living Atlas, it needs some specific tags. So in this case, I've got some demographic data. It's got some income information. It's got some population information. I've got some boundary information. I can check that off. And as I add these things, you'll notice it's adding tags here. So if I save it, it's going to recognize that I've got now some Living Atlas tags. So now I've got better points. If I go to the access and use constraints, this is one that people almost always leave off for some reason. So in this case, I'm using some data that was from another layer published by Esri. So if I go here, I can see that the credits were for Esri. And I can also see the access and use constraints. So I'm going to quickly copy and paste those things in. Save these guys. Now I've gotten over my 80 threshold, and if I wanted to, I won't do this now, I could now go here and nominate this to the Living Atlas. So you can see literally in 3 minutes or whatever we spent here, I fixed a bunch of little things. I got it to a point of acceptability, at least. If I wanted to, I could go fix the remaining items. One of them is I haven't shared it publicly. I could easily fix that. So then if I was happy with it, I click nominate, and then it basically goes into the curator queue. A curator would receive an email. This new map's been nominated. They could then go in, actually look at it, verify that things look good, actually test the map. Does it make sense? And then if it looks good, they accept it, and then it becomes part of our Living Atlas. It goes into our galleries, and others could start taking advantage of it. Pretty simple. And a lot of users I've shown this to who didn't intend to share things with the Living Atlas have actually thought, there's a lot of value here. Like I talked to a federal agency, I won't name them, but they were saying, we've got a lot of users who are out sharing content on behalf of our agency, and then we go look at it, and it really wasn't at a point where it should have been shared, and an administrator wanted to fix it. So they were going to use this app to fix these things before they shared it. And some of these concepts that we're looking at, the online team is aware of, and we're looking to put them into ArcGIS.com. So if you're just creating your items in ArcGIS Online and you're going to share them to everyone, you could fix some of these things there without having to go out to this separate app to do it. So I think there's a lot of value to being aware of these things, one, and then using tools like this to fix them before you do share your work publicly.
Excuse me?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Is this saving this information as you go along?
Yes. So the question is it saving the information? As I was clicking those saves, it's actually saving it back into the item in ArcGIS.com. So if I went, in fact, I could do that. Go back here. If I refresh this information, all those changes that I made separately in that app, you can see are reflected here. So the description and the credits and tags and things are all reflected. And that's because when I signed in, it kind of gave me, it asked for authorization to access that information, and then it can also update that information. So so another app, and you're going to take it on after, yeah, I'll keep going. So that's how you could contribute directly through the Living Atlas contributor app. The other way you can participate is through community maps. So this is a bit different. So that first way, you're creating your own content, you're publishing it, you're sharing it directly. Esri's not really involved other than helping to curate it in. But some users don't have content that they want to share that way. They might have some data like parcels or buildings or elevation, DEMs, and they've seen that that data would improve upon one of Esri's information products, perhaps, and they're interested in making that available. So that's what we built this Community Maps program for. So the goal of this program is to blend local authoritative data from our user community and partner community into one or more community map offerings that Esri is building and maintaining. So there's a number of these. I've listed some here, like our world imagery map, our world topographic map, our ocean-based map, and a few others that we'll talk about later that you could participate in. And we have, like we do for the Living Atlas, we have a contributor app for community maps that you can get to at communitymaps.arcgis.com. And Seth will show kind of how that works here in a minute. Behind the scenes, what's happening is logically this. So if starting from the left, where you see contributor data, imagine that data is things like parcels or buildings or streets. A user can use our contributor app to apply to join. So they can say, I'm the city of Riverside. I'll keep using that example. I'm the GIS manager, and I've got, I produce data for this area of interest, the city of Riverside, and I've got parcels and buildings and elevation and imagery, for example. They can identify that. They submit that information to Esri. We accept them into the program. Seth will talk about how that works. And then they can begin submitting data to us. That data then gets uploaded or delivered to us on drives, and then integrated into a common geodatabase, that GDB you see in the middle, which is essentially a global GDB that Esri maintains. And then from that geodatabase, we can produce various information products, things like our topographic map or our street map, and other value-added services. One of the value-added services we're introducing now is our new vector basemaps. And we'll take a look at those in a minute. But we use ArcGIS Pro as an authoring tool, and we literally point that Pro application to our geodatabase, and then we author maps against that. And then from that Pro map, we can produce vector tiles, like you might have heard about this week, or you can hear about in other sessions. Generate basically pre-cached vector tiles that provide very optimized versions of that data for rapid visualization as vector basemaps. And the vector basemaps have many advantages, and the vector tiles have many advantages. They can be cached very quickly. They don't require a lot of hardware to store them. They can be reused to support many different map styles. So we can produce one set of vector tiles very quickly that can be used to generate multiple styles of vector maps. And with that, I'm going to quickly show you this. So a lot of our community maps, existing community maps contributors, have been asking about participating in our vector base maps and whether their data will be included. And we are including their vector data. And I wanted to show you a little bit how that looks. So first of all, if you're not familiar with our vector base maps, we have a new suite of them. They're in beta release right now. You can discover them through this vector base map group. So if you go to ArcGIS.com and search for vector base maps and say search for groups, you'll find this group. This group contains two things. It contains both web maps and layers of the same. So if I want to see a web map, for example, I can filter by maps, and I can maybe sort by views, see which ones are most frequently used. And I'll see that, for example, the streets at night is our most popular vector base map, and I can open that, and it'll bring up the street map. And I can zoom into an area of interest. Let's say I'll zoom into San Diego. And you can see this is kind of how the vector base maps look and feel. So it's got all the detailed data like we were seeing before, the San Diego area with the convention center, all the data's in there. This is one set of vector tiles, in this case styled in our street style, but the same tiles can be restyled many ways. So to look at a few other examples, this is a simple story map I threw together the other night showing a few different communities in the Community Maps database for different styles. So this is Long Beach, California in our topographic map style. So you can see some of the detailed data from the city of Long Beach, including things like parking lines. But we've got, in the topographic map, we have some unique styling, like this is a symbol set we use to show the beach and how that looks. And then the unique symboling that we have for different other features, like parking lots and building footprints and waters. We can see a couple other communities. This is the topographic map, but for Iowa State University. So in this area, you can see that the university has put in some really nice detailed features, including trees and the lines on their football fields and so forth. And that's all kind of reflected in this topographic map style. Some of the other styles, like streets at night, wouldn't show things like trees. Another community that's done some really nice stuff is Harvard University. They've got the trees and also their athletic facilities, but even their tennis courts are kind of nicely shown in detail. And you can see that same area in a different style. So this is the same vector tiles for Harvard University, but using a different style sheet. This is our modern antique map, which is something very new. In this case, the trees are shown with hand-drawn symbols that are unique to the type of the tree. So it's the literal location of those trees and the type of tree, but shown in a different style with handcrafted symbols, which is kind of cool. And there's another community, another contributor in Germany, Frankfurt, Germany, where you can see that along with other feature types represented different area landmarks, even different water fills. And this modern antique, we did some things to kind of look like paperish material. You can see other styles like Streets at Night from Munich, Germany, another one of our contributors, or Melbourne, Australia. And then Chicago, Illinois has been one of our long-time contributors. This is showing some of their data in our street style along the waterfront, downtown Millennial Park, some of the detailed features they've got there. And then the last couple examples back to San Diego. This is our street style for San Diego, which you can compare to the Streets at Night style. And then in the topographic, you'll see additional features, including the trees and so forth. So you can see various examples of local communities who've contributed content and then how those have been represented in the various styles. Questions on that before we? So these are some of the opportunities. If you do have data that you're interested in sharing through community maps, these are the primary ways in which users are participating. So imagery is one. There's a lot of organizations who are acquiring aerial photography. I've spoken with a few this week. One of them is the state of Texas. They had a program last year to collect 15 centimeter, 30 centimeter imagery for the state of Texas. And they were anxious about how they were going to share that publicly. They didn't really have the infrastructure to share that publicly. So last year at this conference, I'd met with them. They asked if they shared their imagery with us, would we generate kind of cash from that and then publish that? And so we were happy to do that. We've done that for most of the state now. They've delivered all the imagery. We'll finish all the state here in the next few weeks, and that'll all be available. And we're sharing back the cash with them if they want to serve that out internally. So for them, it was a good thing because they didn't have to spend the money caching it and hosting it. For us, it's a good thing because we don't have to go acquire that imagery from commercial sources. We get it from them royalty-free, so we can provide it freely to our users. And then we make it publicly available to everybody. But the key thing there is that their imagery was better than our imagery. If they had just wanted us to publish older imagery, it wouldn't have made sense for us to go down that path. So that's what we're really looking for, imagery that improves upon what we have, or elevation data that improves upon what we have. So these are a few of the opportunities to participate. Seth's going to talk about specifically some of the Basemap opportunities as we move forward. So I'll hand it over to Seth, but before I do that, any questions that you guys had? No? Okay. So.
Good. Everybody hear me okay? You guys are at the apex of the week. It's all downhill from here.
Not starting with your presentation.
Right. It's all downhill from right now. I don't know if you guys caught that, but Dean, if I don't do a good job, I might be out driving the streets for our map, which I don't know, it might be a good gig, right? Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to take over here is to talk about the Basemap contribution, but in Dean's last slide, I'm just going to go back to this. Some of the things that we're looking for, there's a trend. The trend is higher resolution, more detail, and that's what people want. They want more detail on their maps. They want a higher resolution imagery product or an elevation product, and it's really the same for our Basemaps. What we're really looking to source here are large-scale content that go into these Basemaps, make them more useful at the larger scales, make them more realistic to what the real world is out there. The University of Iowa campus, if you toggle between that Basemap and the imagery, I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's showing all the features that are on like an imagery map, and then the usefulness of those products. But some of the layers that we're looking for, we're certainly building footprints. That's a layer that makes a lot of context to our Basemaps. And since last year, the Basemaps, we've added almost 20 million buildings to our Basemap worldwide. And some of that's from our commercial vendors, but most of it has come from communities that have signed up. These type of features are becoming more available, derived from LiDAR or from imagery. But we're looking for polygons like parcels and land use polygons, things that reference schools and medical facilities or parks, local parks and national parks. We're also looking for road symbols or road features as well as the rail symbols. and administrative lines. Administrative lines mean the city boundaries or the county boundaries. And then campus features. And campuses are becoming a growing community within our base maps. Not just campuses like a university, but even like a business campus or even a local park where there's a lot of detail. There's a beautiful park, a botanical garden in St. Louis, Missouri. And they've got every tree designed, they've got every sidewalk, and everything. It's just a beautiful base map. But there is a workflow involved with this, and this is kind of where I'm going to take you for the rest of the afternoon here, is kind of through this workflow of becoming a contributor. The first thing is you apply. And Dean mentioned before that this is a little different than OpenStreetMap. OpenStreetMap is a crowdsourced product. Our product is more selectively crowdsourced. Most of our contributors are authoritative data creators. They create data either using our software, but they actually maintain this information for planning or for infrastructure within their communities. And so that's really the application process. And what I'll do is I'm going to flip over to our website. So we've got this community map app. I've gone to communitymaps.arcgis.com, and what I'm going to do is walk through the process of applying or registering. We kind of intertwine those two terms. First thing is you must use an ArcGIS online account, and it has to be an account that's with your organization. So as I first get in here, there's going to be a series of questions that's off to the left. It's going to ask, who are you? Where are you? Kind of give some context of your geography. And then what layers do you want to contribute? And then you go through this actual submittal process. So I'm going to fill in some of this information. I'll just say that I'm the city of Highland. And we actually just added a citation name. And that citation name is what is actually going to show up at the bottom right-hand corner of the base maps. So the on-screen attribution is kind of an important thing. Some organizations have very specific terms for that. I'm going to just put in City of Highland. We ask which country you're in, the type of organization, meaning that I'm a city or a county or a state, and then a little bit of information about who's registering. So I'm just going to put my name in, my job title, and a very important thing is the email address. That's kind of how we will notify you, and a phone number if that email address doesn't work. As I go to the next screen, it's going to ask me, where am I? Now, there's a couple of ways of doing this. First, it's going to come up with the ability to have a geo search. So I can put in Highland, California, and I can do a search. I don't see my map generating. If you can pan and zoom, this map normally is generating. I don't know if yeah, I've got an internet connection. If this doesn't come up, you can provide your own boundary file. Yeah, just yesterday we got that working. Yeah, I'm on Wi-Fi. Let me see if I refresh that. Oh. It found me in my geo search, but it doesn't show me in the map. It might be my screen resolution. It's not showing me in there. That's right. That's right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click that. We allow you to provide your own boundary file, meaning that if you're a council of governments that maybe take up several counties or several cities, or a university like a campus that's kind of in irregular shape or something, that you can actually go through that process. Now, one thing I'll point out is that the contribution process is kind of built on an area of interest, and you become a data steward for that area of interest. And so you get a polygon that represents where your data is going to be located inside of. Let me make sure. Tamara, were you having any problems with this today? Yeah. Okay. So after the where are you, it goes to what do you want to contribute. And, well, it bounced me back. I'll fill in some information real quick. I'm a city. Seth, manager, and my phone number. I'm going to provide my own boundary file. It did bring up my map at that time, but then it provides me a list of the layers that I want to provide. And there's some categories to the layers. We have some general base map layers, such as building footprints. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. We also have some land use layers. We've separated all of these land use layers. A land use layer could be an airport or a park, cemetery, and these are things that we've separated because sometimes our organizations don't have all of these type of layers, and we want them to provide the information that they have. This is also where you can actually provide or register for imagery, and so if you have an imagery or an elevation. So there's a summary page. The summary page, the only thing I can do here is view a license agreement. So a participation agreement a couple of years ago when we started was a 4 or 5 page document, and Dean had slashed that down to a page and a half. Instead of the document being a required signature, it's now embedded into this registration app. And there's really 2 primary things that the participation agreement is applying to, is that you have the rights to this data, that it is your data, it's not data that you're gathering from somewhere else, and that you're allowing Esri to put it into our products, into our base maps. So by reading this form and accepting this license, I can go on to the summary page. Now, this is where I would submit it. I'm not going to submit this one. But once it is submitted, Esri will review this. And we're going to look for a couple of things, make sure that this is an actual user. Oftentimes, if there's anything that's a little strange with the application, we'll contact by email and ask some questions. What organization, what group of the organization are you? After you get this submitted, you'll get an email that says you've been approved, and you can now join the program. The next step is to prepare your data. And this is kind of the meat of this presentation. And this is where it gets a little bit more technical, a little bit more hands-on. We created some data prep tools, and these data prep tools are meant to kind of take your data, process them through some geoprocessing steps, and output a geodatabase that's sent on to Esri. And there's a couple of reasons for this, and it goes back to kind of how these tools evolved. Most of our contributors that are providing their data, they know their data better than Esri might. So they know the models, the schema, the domains. And what we found is that by having some of this work done up front, a little bit of this processing done up front, we can reduce some of the review cycles or some of the errors that we might interpret, ultimately making this a faster process. And some of our users are actually taking these tools and customizing them within their own organization. They're just model builder models, and actually customizing it and moving it into their own workflows. When we came up with this, we thought that it kind of mimicked the format of doing like an online tax system. So, in the United States, we file our taxes. Everyone has to fill out a 1040 and submit it by April 15th. And, my dad used to fill his out manually, like with the calculator and everything. And I thought, well, think of the 1040 form as like a data model, as like a schema, an open database. And there's lots of places to fill out, and there's lots of places to make mistakes. So this, the TurboTax of data entry, the idea is that it asks you questions, and you follow the procedure, and it puts the data into that format. It puts the data into that model. Just like TurboTax will, at the end of it, it will put it into a 1040 so that you can submit it. And this is a little bit more fun. So there's a couple of prerequisites for the tools. We've made these tools compatible back to the 10.1 ArcMap, and so you can use them up. Now we have not put these into ArcGIS Pro yet. That's going to be some of our work for the rest of this year as some of our users start to demand that. The data formats for the tools, any of the Esri formats, we also can use CAD files in these tools, but you do have to have that as a source file. You need some basic ArcMap understanding, how to open tools, how to run them, and then a little bit of SQL, the SQL expressions that you'll build. And then obviously you need to understand your source data. So as you go through this process to run the data prep tools, first you need to download them. And the last time, right before this slide, somebody asked, where do I get them? And yes, they're a download on arcgis.com. The best way is when I was on our communitymaps.arcgis.com, there's a hyperlink that says download, click to download the data prep tools. It takes you to an online, an ArcGIS online item that the geoprocessing tools can be downloaded from. Now when you download the tools, it'll be a zip file. The zip file will contain a series of folders. And those folders contain information about the tools. There's a doc, a README doc. There's some layer files. There's some map documents. And obviously there's a series of toolboxes. The important piece of this is that you keep those tools that download intact. So there's some hardwired inputs and outputs. And so if I get a support call and somebody says my tools aren't working, sometimes it is because they've taken the toolbox and they've moved it to some other directory rather than that folder structure. So after you've downloaded the tools, it's important to kind of do a little planning. So this is where you might make a list of these layers. Now you may have already done this list when you registered, but it's important to kind of look at it from the data prep tool perspective. And so I don't expect you to read this slide. It's just kind of to show there are 4 main areas where the data, the type of layers that you'll be providing. There's administrative data, that's your city boundaries or neighborhood points. There are land use layers I mentioned before, like parks and airports, and then large scale data. And that's what I mean by campus level data. That's the trees and the parking lots and the parking lot lines that we saw in the demonstration. And then also reference layers, and those are just general data like building footprints or roads. But the idea is to kind of get a plan for what layers that you're going to run through the tools. Now, once you are ready to run the tools, there's a run me first tool. And it's pretty important you have to run it first. You only have to run it once, but you run it first. And what it does is it will create a template geodatabase based on your coordinate system. So the data you provide to us will actually be in your local coordinate system. And there's no way that we could have created a set of tools for everybody's coordinate system. It would have just been a nightmare. So this tool will actually ask you, for your organization name, and it will actually ask you for your coordinate system. And it will use that to produce a template. And that's what the rest of the tools actually use. Once you've run that tool, you're ready to go through a process of running each of your themes through the tools. Now we've got a map document or an MXD file for each one of the themes. And you can open up just the individual theme for parcels and run parcels, and then open up the individual theme for parks and run that. But you can run them all in the same map document. But this is sort of the process. You open the map document, you add your data to that MXD, that map document, you run the tool, you can do some quality assurance to make sure that the output is correct, and then you repeat those steps. So there is a basic structure to these tools, and I think it's important to kind of understand maybe the simplicity of it, not to think that they're really complicated tools. And so, to break these down, all the tools require some form of source data. So again, you have to have in a shapefile or a CAD file or a geodatabase format, you need a source of the data. Most of these tools will require some form of a SQL expression or a selection statement. And that selection statement is just being used to transfer just those selected features from the source data into this output. Most of the tools, because we are making a base map, most of the tools require a label field. Because parks, roads, all these things get labeled in our map. We want to know which field in your source has the attributes for labeling. And then because this is a global-based map, we do accept data from countries and parts of the world that have a local language as well as an English translation. So this is where you would actually put in if you had an English translated field. So an interesting piece to these data prep tools that it was a little bit of an eye-opener to some folks that were providing data before, we put together an all layers map document. And this all layers map document contains all of the layers. Now, when you first open it up and you haven't run any of the tools, they will all have that little red exclamation point. Does everybody know what that little red exclamation point? Everybody, yeah, it's no good. No data. That basically means there's nothing to source that layer. But this map document is already using the layer symbology, the layering of the world topographic map. So as you run a process and you run your tool for a particular theme, then that little red exclamation point goes away. And now your data is in there. So if you run the parcels and the trees and the buildings and the parks, suddenly those layers will come to life in this map. Now you can see what that world topographic map is going to look like before you even send the data. And oftentimes people will see that this is where we might be making some mistakes before sending the data. So it's a good place to do some quality assurance. So after the data has been prepped, you're ready to upload it. And just because of time, I think what I'm going to do is kind of go right into our data prep tool demo. But there is, within our communitymaps.arcgis.com, where you log back into the app, you use the same username and password, the same ArcGIS Online account that you registered. When you log in, you'll zip that file geodatabase, the output of the tools, and you'll upload it through the website. We're just using ArcGIS Online to transfer the data to us. But if the data is over a gigabyte in size, you can request an FTP or a hard drive be sent to you, especially if you're providing like imagery. So after the data has been uploaded, Esri will do some processing. So my team will actually take the data, we'll evaluate it. If you've used the data prep tools already, you've done some evaluation. You've already kind of determined if you've got the right attributes, if you've got the right geometry format for those tools. So when we get this data, we'll actually create a preview map. We're going to take your layers, we're going to integrate it into the base map that's with the existing layers that are in your area, and we're creating kind of a preview map. This is a map that you'll look at before we publish it. And to see this map, you'll go right back into our app. And so we want this app to be kind of like the one-stop shop for all of your community map needs. So you'll log in, it'll be an ArcGIS Online web map that you'll actually open up, and you'll see your content within your area. You'll make you can either do two things. You can say it's all correct and we're ready to move forward, or you can upload new data. So sometimes at this point, an organization might look at the data and say, oh, I sent you last year's data. Let me send you this year's. And so they'll make an update. So they'll send some revised data. And this is a little bit of a loop until we get the map right. Now, I like to point out that we wouldn't create a preview map unless we were ready to move forward with publishing it. Like if it was missing a lot of things, we would communicate with you outside of this, maybe by email or phone call, before moving forward. We typically give the users, the contributors, about 14 days to preview their map. And I know things get busy. Sometimes we have just published that map and said, if you've got changes, we'll do it in the next one. So we just kind of open that loop up. So after you've approved the cache, that preview map, then we go into a publication process. That is where we will take these tiles and we'll integrate them into our services. What I'll mention now is that up till now, the workflow for vector tile contribution or a cache tile raster is exactly the same. Getting the data into that database is the most important piece. At this point is where we would kind of separate the two publication environments. The publication of the vector tiles will be more rapid, it'll be quicker, and the publication of the rasters might take a little bit more time. But from a commitment point of view, as a contributor, we like to think that there's an annual update frequency. We like to think that our organizations will be inspired to provide those at an annual level. Sometimes we've noticed that not a lot of change happens in some cities. And so after a year, there has been such minor changes to the actual layers that were provided that it doesn't need an annual update. But that's kind of the frequency we're looking for. Now, on the flip side, we are looking to take data more frequently. And we've got a few contributors that are providing data on a quarterly basis because they do have a lot of change in their area. And with vector tiles, we're looking to be able to update these even more quickly, that we could potentially be taking data on a monthly basis. Now, one of the questions that came up the last time at this point was, when I'm making updates, do I send you just the changed features, or do I send you the whole layer? And the answer is the latter. We want the whole layer. We're not going to be able to go in and actually look at what features just changed. So if there were 12 buildings that changed since the last time, I'm not going to find those 12 and exchange them. What I'd rather do, and this is the way that we do this, is you send me all of your buildings. I'll take all of your old buildings out and put in all your new buildings, and then we'll refresh that area. All right, so I'm going to switch over to ArcMap and do a demonstration on the data prep tool. So the first thing I'm going to do is just show what the data prep tools look like. I've got ArcMap open and I've got ArcCatalog window off to the left. Again, when I download it, it's a series of folders. I've got my doc folder layer files. I'll just kind of expand the MXDs. Again, there's a map document for every theme. And the more important elements here are my toolboxes. And this is where I go in and actually can do my work within this. But what I want to do here is kind of examine some data. So we're in the beautiful Walla Walla Valley in Washington. Has anybody been there? All right. Right, so they've provided some parks. And from the surface here, it looks like from their data, they have a layer that's called WWCI parks. And so it might appear that all of these features are parks. And I could just run the tool and process these. But what I want to do is kind of point out is that when I worked with the city of Walla Walla, they did point out that they have more than just parks inside this layer. And so this is where kind of knowing your data and investigating this can make some good decisions. So what I'm going to do is they have a subtype. And a subtype of their parks shows me that they separate their parks into things like athletic fields, cemeteries, golf courses, open spaces, a park, a general park, recreation areas, school playgrounds, and sports complex. Now, when I look at this, I notice that we also have tools for golf courses and cemeteries. And so instead of just loading all of this data into the parks, because it's not all parks, I need to do a little bit of special handling with these features. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up the local parks tool, and we're going to go through this exercise of transferring the features for just the parks. So here's the tool. It's relatively simple, and it's got a little bit of help on the right-hand side. The first thing I need to do is say which is my source. And I've got parks and buildings in this layer. So I'm going to point to my parks. A nice thing about this for these tools is that it will read your data. When you're creating the SQL expression, it's going to read the data that's in your table of contents. So the thing I need to do here is if I wanted to transfer all the features, I would leave that expression blank. And the way it'll work is it'll think that everything's a park, and it'll transfer everything over to my output. But that's not the case. I actually have in here a subtype, and what I'll do is I'll just show these unique values. And so they've got a numeric value that's associated with these subtypes, and I'm going to use the in expression. And anybody in here with a little bit of SQL knowledge will know that there's about 4 ways to do this. But I'm going to do it by creating an in expression. So I'm going to include everything except for cemeteries and golf courses. I've looked at the recreation areas and the athletic fields. I want to include those in here. So I'm just going to make an expression that says subtype in 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I'm going to verify that expression to make sure it does successfully verify, and I'll say OK. The next thing it's going to ask me is to select the field for my labels. And I looked at the data before. I noticed there was a name field. I'm going to use the field calculator. It actually brings up the field calculator. It allows me to double-click the field. And that'll be where my language or my labels come from. Now, because my language that I've already used is English, I don't have an English translation of them. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And that's really all I have to fill out for this tool. And it's going to run through and transfer these features. Now, I'm a little corny, and maybe some of my team knows that, but I like to think of this process as scooping data out of my source data and transferring it over into my, so from one bucket into another. And the way I've transferred this data is by those selection statements. So it's very important to not have duplicated data. So I've transferred that over. Now, it automatically loads that layer into the ArcMap table of contents. And it's using the layering, the layer symbology from the world topographic map. And so you'll see in here that I've got all of my features and their labeling and everything. So this is a great way to make sure that you've got everything correct. So that's a pretty simple one. I mean, it did have some complexities by having to find just my park features. The next one I want to demonstrate are for buildings. Now, let me just zoom out to my buildings in this layer. I've got some building footprint polygons from the city of Walla Walla, and they've got all of these features, every house, as well as commercial property or the like in the city. And when I look at the data, I notice that it has a field for a category. Now, this is a really interesting example. They've got almost 64 different categories of their buildings. Now, some organizations are on a different side of the spectrum. They might have only 4 or 5 different categories. They've actually got a category identified for every agriculture feature, every childcare. There are 5 coffee shops in the city of Walla Walla. So they've got all these different uses. Now, the exercise that I go through in order to use the data prep tools, because the data prep tool actually only asks for a couple of feature types, what I go through here is a grouping exercise. Now, I did this with good old-fashioned Excel. And so what I did is I took all of the building classes that were in my feature class, and I moved those out into Excel so that I could see them and I could interact with them. And this actually included the count of all of them. And then what I did is I mapped these values over to what our community map values are. And those are what I found from the actual data prep tool. I opened the data prep tool, I noticed that these are the categories, and I mapped them over. And if I can look at this from a point of view, like if I view these, oops, I wanted to sort. If I sort these by, oh no, not that cell. If I sort these by my community maps value, I'll notice that I've got airport features, commercial features, cultural features, education features. And so that's just my way of mapping these. And then what I did is I transferred these values back onto my data. So that was a way, so instead of having very large expressions in my data prep tools where I'd have many different things, I transferred these attributes back in. So now when I go back, I can actually run, what I did is I pre-populated some of these values into a demo tool. And you'll see that in the building footprint tool, it asks an expression for every one of these building categories, every one of these building types. And so I've got, it says create an expression to select the general or residential buildings. And so I've just kind of coded that in, building category equals 1. And then the same for military and education. So I've got all of these kind of lined in here. Now, I'm not going to run this just for the interest of time, but this is how you go through that exercise. Now, this is, again, I wanted to be honest and kind of tell a little bit more of maybe an more detailed story, there's a little bit of preparing that has to happen. But I think those people that know their data will make these decisions, much better. Any questions on the data prep process? Okay. Well, let's see. That was the last slide. So
the results of that.
Yeah.
So the results of that would become a geodatabase that you would then zip up, upload to online, and then you'd go through the remainder of the review process, publishing process, and so forth.
Right.
Cool. Okay. So I think that covers the end of the demo on the community maps. So I think we've covered all the main material that we wanted about the Living Atlas, how you participate, the two different ways, contributing through this direction. So with that, we will open it up to any other general questions that you guys might have. We've got a few minutes left. Any questions you guys have? Yes, sir.
I noticed you had a government polygon class, but I didn't see a government ARC class. I work for Fish and Wildlife, and we have a lot of regulations on the streams. So I'm wondering, is that significant? Is there something I can do about dealing with that with this?
So is this about contributing data for the base maps?
Right.
So the streams that are in the Basemaps. So the water, that we have two different types of water features that can be provided. One is the linear features, so the actual lines. The other is the water polygons, so the water bodies. And so there are separate tools for each of those. And so if your organization maintains those type of features for a particular area, that we can certainly look at getting you registered and then evaluating that content. But yeah, I mean, water lines and water bodies are features in the base maps. They're used in all the different base maps, and we're certainly looking at for contributions to those features. The categories, there are a few categories that we look for. The types of water body, whether it's an ocean feature versus a river, those are the type of things, and also names. So we do want a naming attribute for them.
I think we're mixing things up here. It's not so much that we're contributing arcs for streams, but rather the regulations on them for the fishing rules. So it's actually sort of government. It's not geography. It's here you can fish for sturgeon, here you can fish for crappie. It's during these types of years. It's with this type of year, that type of thing.
So that's probably a good opportunity to raise. So in the community maps, we have different kind of product types, and in the one that Seth was describing was kind of a base map. So he's describing the data model that supports the base map product, and that probably wouldn't be appropriate for what you're describing there. But we either define other products that would use that, or we would say that's an additional type of information product that would sit on top of the base map. So a lot of times that's what happens. Let's say in Asia, one of the features they like to see a lot on the base maps are metro station stops. And from our perspective, we consider that more of an operational layer. Like on the base map, we wouldn't put a lot of those features into the base map itself. We would display that on top. And so we've created that as a separate operational layer. I think for what you're describing, that would probably also be appropriate. So you might show the physical feature, the geography of it in the base map, and then overlay kind of the administrative, the regulatory information related to that as an operational layer that you could symbolize in different ways depending on status and so forth. So I think we would look at that as an operational layer that would maybe be the first type of contribution. You'd publish that as a separate service that would be draped on top of the base map and then could be used together. Does that make sense? Okay. Other questions folks have? Are there any people who are actually contributing at this point to community maps by any chance? In the last session, we had 3 or 4 active contributors, and they were learning what the new tools were. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How do you resolve either conflicts in jurisdiction or territory, either one inside, nested inside, or abutting?
Yeah, that's a big part of the application process that what we're trying to do is identify any potential conflicts like that. Seth, do you want to kind of tackle how you do that?
Let me step on my microphone. Yeah, so that's a great question. So conflicts of geography are usually worked out by the best data. You know, so oftentimes we'll have a county, we'll have a city that nests within that county. If both of them want to contribute content, we'll either work with both of them and say, who's got the best data? And sometimes it's even that the city has the county's data or vice versa type thing. Or we'll mix them together. And oftentimes an area of interest will act almost like a cookie cutter. And so you will provide data within your area of interest and not outside of it. Now, we've seen cities that have data for an entire county. And what we'll do is we'll register them as a city, but we'll give them an AOI as the whole county. You know, so, and then vice versa. We've had counties that register and they only have data for within some cities in their area. But most of the time, the conflict is purely done on a data evaluation basis. And either we'll ask the communities to go through that process themselves, and we have done that, or when we get the data, especially if it's different time. You know, if the county has contributed and they've been a contributor for a year, and then the city comes along. And then we'll look at it and say, you know what, the city's buildings actually are more detailed, they have more attributes, so within the city boundaries, we're gonna replace that data. Or vice versa, the data isn't as good and we're gonna keep the county's data. So.
And part of that evaluation, we've had cases where a city will donate, let's say, buildings and streets and parcels, and we'll look at them and we'll determine that the buildings and parcels actually align nicely with our imagery. They look to be positionally accurate, but there's some issues with the streets. Our commercial data may be better. So we might reject one contribution because it's not better than what we already have and then accept other ones. In the past, that was problematic because the only way you could contribute your data was to produce a complete map, and then we would replace our map with your map because we weren't doing it layer by layer. Now that we do it layer by layer, we can be selective about which layers we bring in and apply the ones that are better. The other type of conflict we sometimes see is adjacent communities. You know, a city of Pasadena next to the city of Glendale, and they won't align. And we try to avoid like fixing the data from our perspective because we might introduce error rather than resolve error. But we'll get them talking, and we've seen cases where they basically, you know, like the boundaries of their communities didn't align. They would actually determine between them, yeah, this is the better one, and they'll snap it. So they've kind of cleaned up their own data as part of integration. And for some of them, that was a big motivation for participating because they'll have activities that cross their municipal boundaries or their county boundaries, but they don't want their information products to stop at the borders. So by putting both of those into one data set, they basically get the benefits of having continuity outside of their jurisdictions. And that's been a benefit of having their data in other adjacent communities. So some of them have said, I participated, you guys should participate too because we're missing out on all the data around this community, and it's kind of grown virally for that reason.
We call that horizontal motivation.
Sometimes we see competitors, like Seattle likes to be, if Portland's in the map, Seattle needs to be in the map kind of thing. So it's sometimes a little friendly competition isn't a bad thing either. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much for your time. Have a great week.